All right, everyone get ready because today we are going deep into Canadian immigration.
Yeah, some pretty big news just dropped.
We found a video with some breaking news that could totally change the game.
If you're thinking about becoming a permanent resident in Canada,
Yeah, especially if you're working with the express entry system.
this is big.
Huge.
It seems like the Canadian government might get rid of
A big part of the process.
a key part of how they decide who gets in.
Those points you get.
Yeah, points awarded for having something called an LMIA.
An LMIA, or Labor Market Impact Assessment.
Yeah, it sounds technical,
Very.
but it's a big deal for anyone hoping to immigrate.
To make Canada their permanent home.
Right,
So for those who haven't spent their lives studying Canadian immigration,
for the regular folks out there.
let's quickly break down what an LMIA actually is.
It's basically a document that a Canadian employer gets
If they need to hire
someone from outside Canada,
to fill a job
they can't fill with a Canadian citizen or permanent resident.
they can't fill locally.
Right, so it basically
Proves
shows the Canadian government that you're not just any applicant.
you're special.
You've got a specific job lined up.
You're in demand.
A company is saying, we need this person.
We need their skills.
Yeah, think of it like a golden ticket.
Like a fast pass.
You get to skip ahead in line.
And we're not talking about a few bonus points here, right?
I know, this is serious stuff.
A regular LMIA gets you 50 points.
On your application.
50. But if you've got one for a management job,
Boom, 200 points?
200. That's a huge advantage.
In a system where every point matters.
Yeah, we're talking about potentially jumping ahead.
Leapfrogging thousands of other applicants.
But now here's where things get a little shady.
Oh, yeah, this is where it gets interesting.
It turns out there's a whole black market for these LMIAs.
A black market.
Really?
Yeah. The video we watched said that people are paying
Paying.
up to $70,000 for fake job offers.
Oh, $70,000.
To snag those points. So they can jump the line.
Exactly.
That's wild.
That's shocking, right?
It really undermines the whole system,
The whole idea of a fair immigration process,
where people are chosen based on their merits,
based on what they bring to the table.
not how much money they have.
And it sounds like Canada's immigration minister, Marc Miller,
He's aware of this.
he's not happy about it.
It sounds like he's taking this very seriously.
He called the LMIA system a double-edged sword,
Uh-huh.
and he's thinking about getting rid of the points altogether
Wow. To fight this fraud.
to try to level the playing field.
So this is a real dilemma.
We're at a tough situation.
Yeah, on the one hand, you want to stop the fraud,
You want a fair system.
but on the other hand, you don't want to make it impossible
For skilled workers with real job offers,
to come to Canada.
it's a balancing act for sure.
And the thing is, this LMIA issue,
It's just one piece of the puzzle.
it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Our sources suggest that Canada's immigration system
The whole system.
is facing some even bigger challenges.
Challenges that are forcing the government.
To really rethink how they do things.
Yeah, to rethink their whole approach to immigration.
It feels like this is about more than just tweaking a policy here and there.
This is about the big picture.
Yeah, like we're starting to see
All these different issues.
all these different problems,
They're all connected.
like this whole network of challenges.
It's really
A
fascinating.
bit overwhelming.
But it's important to understand these connections.
Yeah, if we want to grasp what's really going on.
And what it means for the future of Canada.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these bigger challenges.
All right, let's do it.
Starting with public opinion.
Public opinion on immigration.
Yeah, it seems like things are shifting.
How so?
Well, for the first time in 25 years,
25 years.
a majority of Canadians feel like the country has let in too many immigrants.
Wow, that's a pretty big shift.
It is, but it's important to understand
And a nuance.
what this actually means.
What are people really saying?
Minister Miller has said that Canadians are still welcoming,
They're not closing the doors.
but there's a growing concern about the pace of change
How fast things are moving.
and whether the current system is sustainable
If it can work in the long term.
for everyone involved.
For Canadians and for newcomers.
Right. It makes sense you need to find that balance
That sweet spot.
where you're welcoming newcomers,
But also making sure that integration is successful.
that people can build a life
And
here.
that communities can thrive.
And one of the biggest strains on the system right now
Oh yeah, this is a big one.
is that massive asylum backlog.
So many people waiting.
250,000 cases
Stuck in limbo.
just waiting to be processed.
And this creates huge delays.
Imagine waiting years
With your life on hold.
for a decision that could change everything.
Heartbreaking.
And this backlog,
It's not just a humanitarian issue.
it also shows a deeper problem.
What's that?
The potential for more irregular migration,
People crossing borders without authorization.
especially if certain things happen in the United States.
Ah, yes, the elephant in the room.
It seems like some folks are worried about a surge in asylum seekers
Crossing the border from the U.S.
if there's a change in the political situation.
This adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Yes.
Because Canada has these international agreements,
Like the safe third country agreement with the U.S.,
which basically means
that asylum seekers
they have to claim asylum.
in the first safe country they get to.
Right, so if you cross from the U.S. into Canada,
You're generally expected to seek asylum in the U.S. first.
but of course there are exceptions.
And navigating those exceptions can be really tricky.
It can be a real mess.
And Canada has been criticized for how it's handled this in the past.
It's a sensitive issue.
So the government is trying to get ahead of this,
To be more proactive.
especially with the potential for increased migration in the future.
They're trying to prepare for different scenarios.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got public concerns about population growth.
And its impact on things like housing,
We've got this huge asylum backlog
straining resources.
and the possibility of more irregular migration from the U.S.,
It's a lot for any country to handle.
especially one that prides itself on being welcoming.
And inclusive.
So how does Canada address all of this?
That's the question, isn't it? What are the solutions?
Well, stay tuned, because in the next part,
We're going to unpack some potential solutions
and what they could mean for you.
for anyone thinking about moving to Canada.
This is where things get really interesting.
It is.
So don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back. Okay, so we've laid out some pretty big challenges, some big problems facing Canada's immigration system.
A lot to think about.
It is, but the question is, what are the solutions?
How can Canada keep welcoming newcomers?
While still dealing with all these concerns.
Right, and making the system,
Sustainable.
yeah, so it can actually work in the long run.
That's the tough part.
It's a tough question.
Yeah, there's no easy answer.
No magic wand.
But the stuff we've been looking at, the source material suggests
That the Canadian government,
they're trying a bunch of different things.
they're exploring a multi-pronged approach.
That's a fancy way of saying.
They're tackling this from all angles.
Yeah, trying to fix
Everything all at once.
from fraud to backlogs to those international agreements we talked about.
Like they're trying to fix a leaky boat while they're still sailing it.
Oh, I like that analogy.
They need to patch the holes.
Without sinking the ship.
Exactly.
So where do they even start?
Well, let's start with that black market for LMIAs.
Yeah, that whole fraud thing.
What can they actually do to crack down on that?
Well, Minister Miller has mentioned,
Increasing enforcement.
yeah, putting more resources into investigations.
Making the penalties tougher for people who get caught cheating the system.
And maybe even working with other countries
To share
to
information.
coordinate their efforts.
So it's not just Canada going it alone.
It's about sending a clear message that they're serious about this.
That they won't tolerate fraud.
It's about protecting the integrity of the system.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the asylum backlog?
That mountain of cases.
250,000 people waiting.
It's a logistical nightmare.
How can they possibly speed up that process?
Without, cutting corners or sacrificing fairness.
Got to be done right.
It's a huge challenge.
So what are they thinking about doing?
Well, one idea is to streamline the process.
Make it more efficient.
Maybe prioritize cases based on urgency,
So the most vulnerable people get help first.
or cases that seem more likely to be successful.
So they're not wasting time on cases that are probably going to be rejected.
Right, and they could also try to increase capacity,
Hire more people,
maybe use technology to speed things up,
like AI or something.
possibly, or even partner with NGOs.
Organizations that already have experience with this kind of work.
Yeah, tap into their expertise.
So it's about working smarter, not just harder.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the backlog. But then there's that whole question of irregular migration.
People crossing the border outside of official channels.
Yeah, if that spike in asylum seekers happens,
Like some folks are predicting.
how is Canada preparing for that?
Well, this is where things get really tricky.
Yeah, we're talking about international agreements.
Remember that safe third country agreement with the U.S.?
Yeah, that basically says
You can't just hop the border and claim asylum.
you're supposed to do that in the first safe country you get to.
So Canada can't just open the floodgates.
They have to uphold those agreements
But at the same time, they have to be prepared.
for a potential humanitarian crisis.
If a lot of people start showing up at the border,
It's a tough spot to be in.
a real dilemma.
So what options do they have?
Well, one thing they're looking at,
Strengthening collaboration with the U.S.,
working more closely together.
maybe even renegotiating parts of that safe third country agreement.
To make it more adaptable to different situations.
So it's more about cooperation than confrontation,
Finding solutions that work for both countries.
rather than just trying to pass the buck
Exactly. Another idea is to address the root causes.
of displacement,
Yeah, the reasons why people are fleeing their home countries in the first place.
conflict, persecution, poverty.
All of that.
So working with international organizations,
To try to improve conditions in those countries.
so people don't feel like they have to leave.
It's a long-term solution.
But it's crucial if we want to create a more just and sustainable world.
It's about getting to the heart of the problem.
Okay, so we've got stricter enforcement,
To combat fraud,
efforts to streamline asylum processing,
to deal with that backlog
and increase collaboration.
with the U.S. and international organizations.
It sounds like they're trying to cover all the bases.
They're throwing everything they've got at it.
But is it going to be enough?
That's the big question. And here's the thing. Sometimes when you try to fix one problem,
You end up creating new ones.
unintended consequences.
It's like squeezing a balloon.
The air just moves to a different part.
So how do you make sure these solutions actually work without just shifting the problem around?
That's the million-dollar question.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, because it's not just about finding technical solutions.
It's about values,
It's about vision
about what kind of immigration system Canada wants to have.
into future.
What does it mean to be a welcoming country?
In a world where more and more people are on the move,
And how do you balance all those different priorities?
compassion and practicality.
Fairness and efficiency.
It's a lot to consider.
It really is.
But this is where you, the listener, come in.
Yeah, this is where we need everyone to be engaged.
Because it's easy to get lost in the headlines.
And the political arguments.
But at the end of the day,
This is about people's lives.
real people with real hopes and dreams.
Each one of those 250,000 asylum cases.
It's a human story.
A family hoping for a better future.
And the decisions Canada makes,
They'll have ripple effects.
impacting generations to come.
So we all have a stake in this.
We need to stay informed
Engage in thoughtful discussions.
and work together to create a more just and compassionate world.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture.
The systemic challenges.
But let's bring it back down to the individual level.
Yeah, what does all this mean?
For someone who's actually trying to immigrate to Canada,
What advice would you give them?
given all these potential changes,
Well, first of all, don't panic.
don't freak out.
There are still lots of ways to get permanent residency
Canada is still committed to attracting skilled workers,
and other people who can contribute to society.
but things are definitely changing.
It's not business as usual,
And those changes could make things more complicated.
especially for people who are counting on those LMIA points.
To boost their application,
So my advice would be to be proactive
stay informed.
and be ready to adapt.
If things don't go as planned,
Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
explore different options.
Do your research
Make sure you understand the eligibility requirements.
and maybe even talk to an immigration expert.
Get some professional guidance.
Yeah, someone who can help you navigate the system
So it's all about being prepared,
and being flexible.
because the immigration landscape,
It's always changing.
and the more adaptable you are.
The smoother the journey will be.
I think that's great advice. Be informed, be adaptable, and don't give up on your dreams.
Even if the path gets a little bumpy.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges,
The potential solutions.
but what about the long-term implications?
Yeah, where is all of this headed?
What does the future hold for Canadian immigration? It's kind of like we're standing at the edge of a cliff, right? Looking out at the future of Canadian immigration. And it's exciting, but also
Yeah, a little scary.
unsettling, for sure.
A lot of uncertainty.
We've talked about the challenges, the possible solutions, the trade-offs, but like,
For someone who wants to move to Canada,
who's dreaming of making Canada their home?
what does it all actually mean for them?
What does it mean for their future?
Well, I think it's important to remember change can be good.
Good.
Well, when things get harder, people get creative, right?
They have to find new ways to adapt.
Exactly. So if some paths to immigration become more difficult,
Like if they get rid of those LMIA points,
people will naturally look for other ways to get in,
find new routes,
and that could lead to a whole bunch of creative solutions.
like people thinking outside the box.
Exactly, and we might see a more diverse group of immigrants too,
People with different skills, different backgrounds.
all contributing to Canada's economy in different ways.
So instead of just trying to fit into a mold,
People might start carving out their own paths.
making their own opportunities.
Right, and that could be a really good thing for Canada.
How so?
Well, we might see more people starting businesses,
Becoming entrepreneurs.
filling gaps in the labor market that nobody even knew existed.
Bringing new ideas to the table.
It could lead to new jobs, economic growth, a more vibrant society.
So maybe these challenges,
As tough as they are.
could actually spark a wave of innovation.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Exactly. And push Canada to be even more competitive globally.
It's definitely possible.
So instead of just trying to fill existing jobs,
They could be attracting a whole new generation of job creators.
that's a pretty cool thought.
It is, and it speaks to something really important about immigration.
What's that?
It's not just about filling gaps,
It's about making society richer, more diverse.
bringing in new perspectives, new skills, new ways of thinking,
So maybe this is a chance for Canada
to really redefine what it means to be welcoming,
to go beyond just opening the doors
to actually create an environment
where newcomers can succeed,
where they can thrive
contribute their talents.
and help build a better future for everyone,
It's about thinking long term,
not just short-term fixes.
building a sustainable system.
That benefits everyone.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today
It's been a real deep dive.
into the complexities of Canadian immigration.
We've seen the challenges, the possible solutions,
And maybe even a few silver linings.
a few reasons for optimism.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has.
And I hope our listeners are feeling a little more informed
A little more empowered.
to navigate this ever-changing world. But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought, one question to ponder.
Okay.
What if Canada does decide to get rid of those LMIA points?
Big change
What new strategies might people come up with to immigrate?
to get permanent residency.
Will it actually make things fairer?
More level playing field.
Or will it just create new challenges?
Shift the problems around.
It's something to think about.
It is, and it reminds us that the landscape of immigration is always changing.
Always evolving.
So we need to stay informed,
Keep learning
be adaptable.
and never give up on our dreams.
Well said.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the future of Canadian immigration.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.